بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So in the book Nuzhat Nadhr we finished discussing about ahadith that are mutawatira, ahadith that are ahad and mashhur, aziz, gharib. Inshallah all the tullab ilm should now know these terms. We talked about gharib having two types. The mufrad, that is mutlaq, and nisbiyu. Now, inshallah, after that, Imam Ibn Hajar Asqalani, he continues to say, fi nukhba wal khabar al ahad, then he talks about khabar al ahad. How are they acceptable? Bi naqli adlin tami dabti muttasil as-sanad غير معلل ولا شاذ فهو صحيح لذاته. So this is something from Nukhba. In Nuzhat we will explain his Sharh as well. But Tullab ilm should memorize this. When I started studying Mustalah al-Hadith way back, we started with Bayquniya at that time. And even before that, our Shaykh, he made us memorize the shurut of a Sahih Hadith by memory. And since then, these 5 shurut, I remember them, alhamdulillah, and I expect that all Tullab ilm know them, because this is the asas, this is the base of what a Sahih Hadith is. And then we'll talk about different levels within Sahih Ahadith, but this should be memorized by all of the Tullab ilm. Tayyib, so if a hadith is from the khabar al-ahad, if it's mashhur, aziz or gharib, in that sense, if it's mutawatira, then those are acceptable to begin with. If it's not, then these are 5 conditions that must be met for it to be sahih lidatihi. Tayyib, what is that? Adl, what is that? Adl al-rawi, as we say, that every narrator should have good moral character. Tayyib. Dabt al-rawi, which here Ibn Hajar calls tam al-dabt, the narrator should be precise in their narrating. Tayyib, muttasil al-sanad, the sanad should be muttasil, istisal al-sanad, meaning the sanad should be connected, there should be no breaks in the sanad. Tayyib, غير معلل, that it should not have ilal in the hadith, and la shadh, it should not be from shudud, it should not have something stronger contradicting it. فهو صحيح لذاته, this is صحيح لذاته. Tayyib, in every one of these categories, I like to give certain short, authentic ahadith as examples. It's always good for Tullab ilm to learn with examples. So, mithal hadith sahih lidatihi. What is an example? The hadith that I mentioned here for the Tullab ilm to memorize as well. Man yurid Allahu bihi khayran yufaqihuhu fid din. This is the hadith that Muawiyah radiallahu anhu reports from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good for, He gives him the fiqh, the understanding of the religion. This hadith in al-Bukhari, and no doubt it's authentic. Why? It meets these 5 shurut, and it's sahih lidati on a very high level, and we'll talk about the different levels inshaAllah. Ibn Hajar Asqalani then in his own Sharh, his own explanation, he explains هذا الأول تقسيم, this is the first taqsim, al-maqbul. So now he's taking it back to where he talked about maqbul and mardud. Because this is maqbul ila arba anwa, and then maqbul has 4 types. I mentioned this ijmalan already in the dars, but here it's from the book now where we are in the matan. إنه إما أن يشتمل من صفات القبول على أعلاها أو لا. Beautiful. He said either it meets these 5 shurut at a very high level or not. It may meet the 5 shurut, but maybe it's not at the very high level. Tell you, what does that mean? We talk about adl al-rawi, right? But not all rawat are the same in their category. Tayyib. So if you have a hafiz of hadith, from the huffaz of ilm, then that's a very high level. If you have imma like Imam Ahmad and Shafi'i of hadith, of memorizing hadith, and al-Malik and Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah and all these ulama who wrote books in hadith, and it's them in the rawat, that's a very high level. Tayyib. But if you have another narrator like Abdurrahman ibn Muhammad, he's a narrator, he's a rawi, but he's not at the level of of Imam Ahmad or Abdul Razak al-San'ani or one of those ulama, but he's not rejected. So here he's still acceptable, but he will not be at the level of Sahih. He will then be at the level of Hassan, and we'll talk about that here inshallah. طيب المقبول إلى أربع أنواع. طيب, so there's four subcategories. He goes, if it's on the sifat of qabul على الأعلاها, on the top level, then the فأول هذا هو صحيح لذاته. This is صحيح لذاته. And if you find يخبر ذلك قصور ككثرة الطرق, if there is something a little bit lacking there, not a weak narrator, but a narrator that doesn't reach that really high level of Sahih Rawat, but it has many turuq, has many other paths supporting it, فهو صحيح أيضا, هو لا لذاته, هذا المعنى صحيح لغيره. طيب. So he says, okay, if you find one that meets those categories, but not at the a'la, not at the top, they're not amazing narrators, then if there are other supporting chains, then it's not Sahih lidhatihi, but then it gets bumped up. It would be Hassan by itself, but it gets bumped up due to supporting evidence to Sahih li ghayrihi. Tayyib, so this is two now. He said arba anwa, right? There's four types of maqbul. One, Sahih lidhatihi. Now he's discussed Sahih li ghayrihi. And if it is not, then it will be Hassan. If it doesn't have those supporting evidences, but it does not violate any five of these shurut. Hassan still has to meet the same criteria, it's just that Sahih meets it at a very high level. Tayyib. So then the hadith would be Hassan, still acceptable. But if there is some shortcoming there, there is maybe a light weakness in it, maybe one of the, not in the adl, but usually in the dabt, maybe somebody's not a famous narrator, maybe he has a little bit and he makes some mistakes, and we're worried a little bit that maybe he made a mistake or he didn't, but it has many other asanid that support it. Okay? So now, even though it may have some slight weakness, but because of the many other supporting evidences, it gets bumped to Hassan li ghayrihi. So the arba anwa here being Sahih li dhatihi, Sahih li ghayrihi, Hassan li dhatihi, Hassan li ghayrihi. I'm giving this summary again and again because I want everybody to memorize and understand. What does it mean? Sahih li dhatihi, authentic upon its own merit, meets these five criteria at the highest level. Tayyib? If it doesn't, if it actually would fall under Hassan, but due to supporting evidences, other asanid, maybe mawquf ahadith, maybe other marfu ahadith, then it gets bumped up to Sahih li ghayrihi. Tayyib. If it is Hassan, it meets those five criteria, but does not have anything that can bump it up to a higher level, then it's Hassan. But if there is Hassan li dhatihi, but if there is a slight weakness, not a major weakness, not a kadhab, not a matruk rawi or something like this, no, but a slight weakness, but there are many other supporting evidences that show that this is not a mistake, then here now once again you get bumped up to Hassan li ghayrihi, from da'if to Hassan li ghayrihi. Who makes this classification? Ulama, based on shurut, based on what we've discussed, based on tarajim, but the biographies of those rijal. Looking at all of that, the ulama of hadith, they come and they give this classification. Tayyib. Now what does it mean adl? Ibn Hajar Asqalani mentioned that this has to do with taqwa, and it has to do with their a'mal and their good and bad of it, and them being saved from shirk or fisq or bid'ah. If you see somebody who is a mubtadi', a person of bid'ah, then this is obviously a weakness. Now how weak is that narrator depends on his bid'ah. Is it bid'ah that takes him outside the fold of Islam, like worshipping qubur and things like this? Or is it a bid'ah that maybe affects some of his ibadat, but overall does not affect him to be outside the fold of Islam? What kind of fasiq? Is it an open fasiq, a hidden fasiq from major sins, or how? Shirk, akbar, asghar, all of that has to be taken in consideration. But all of these things would affect the adl. Dabt. Now, dabt, there are two types, as Ibn Hajar Asqalani mentions in Nuzhat Nadhr. Ad-dabt, dabtan. The precision in reporting is of two types. Dabt al-sadri wa dabt al-kitaba. Tayyib. What does that mean? One is that somebody is an excellent memorizer. They are precise in memorizing. They hear the hadith, they memorize it. 20 years later, you ask them, they tell you letter by letter, word by word. And there are ulama of hadith like this who memorize, for example, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal memorized 1 million ahadith, alf, with the chains and their authenticity and their understanding. Amazing, right? These are ayat from the ayat of Allah. These are people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed because of their piety and because of their effort that they did in keeping away from sins and so on and so on. So that's dabtu sadr. That's somebody who just memorized really well. But not everybody has that amazing memory. That doesn't mean that they cannot be strong narrators in hadith. There is also dabt in kitab, yani the one who would write down and their notes would be accurate. So when they narrated a hadith, maybe if they just memorized, they would make mistakes, but when they had their notes, they were acceptable narrators. We don't reject them for that. We don't expect that everybody will have an amazing memory. That's something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some people have, some people don't have. If somebody is able to report properly from their notes, this is also acceptable. Tayyib. But now between those narrators, there are different levels. Tayyib. Based on these awsaf, based on these sifat, meaning that not every rawi is the same and not every book of hadith will be at the same level. So here you have, for example, the highest levels of ahadith, and this is from my own notes. Ibn Hajar will discuss this himself as well later on in the book, but I will mention it inshallah ta'ala here. Tayyib. أولا متفق عليه. طيب, the highest. Now we're not talking about mutawatir ahadith. Mutawatir ahadith is a different category. We're talking about ahad. Mutawatir being ilm al-yaqini, that's already a very high level. But under ahad hadith, those ahadith and the rawat that meet the criteria of both Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim. Al-Hafiz Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari and Muslim ibn Hajjaj, the great ulama, scholars of hadith, that had so we talked about these 5 shurut. These are the beginning of the authenticity and judgment of a hadith. Other a'imma and ulama, they have other shurut. Every major scholar of hadith has additional shurut of their own usually. But these 5 we all agree that if something meets these 5 criteria, that's a sahih hadith. If it meets it at a'la, at the highest level, or at least hassan. Tayyib. But Imam Bukhari, he had additional conditions. Imam Muslim had additional conditions. Not only did they want the adl and dabt and things, but for example, Imam Bukhari said that I have to know that these 2 narrators met and where they met and when they met. It's not enough that a narrator says, I heard from this, for example, Imam Malik. But then, when did you meet Malik? When did you sit? And is it documented that you sat in the halaqah of Imam Malik? Then that would meet that criteria. Tayyib. Imam Muslim, for example, he said, well, I need to know that they were in the same town, but not necessarily that where they met and so on and so on. And everybody had their own additional rules. And they all said, Imam Bukhari said, if something doesn't meet my criteria for my book, it doesn't mean it's not sahih, as did Imam Muslim. But if something meets muttafaqun alayhi, what does it mean muttafaqun alayhi? In the istalah that we use today, mostly as Ibn Hajar and others have documented, it means what's reported from Bukhari and Muslim. Other ai use this istalah differently. For example, Majduddin ibn Taymiyyah, he would not consider a hadith to be muttafaqun alayh unless Imam Bukhari, Muslim, Imam Ahmad, all 3 of these ai agreed on it. So if it meets the criteria of Bukhari and Muslim, this is muttafaqun alayh, this is the highest level. Tayyib, what's next? If it meets the criteria of Bukhari alone. Tayyib, this is the next level. Then the 3rd level, if it meets the criteria of Muslim but not Imam Bukhari. Then the 4th level, if it is sahih according to the shurut of Bukhari and Muslim, but they are not recorded by Bukhari and Muslim, but it does meet their criteria. Tayyib. 5th, if it's only upon the shurut of Imam Bukhari. Then if it's only upon the shurut of Imam Muslim. Then sahih walakin laysa ala shurutihima. If it's sahih but it doesn't meet their shurut, but it meets sahih li dhatihi, the 5 shurut. Then sahih li ghayrihi. Then hassan li dhatihi. Then hassan li ghayrihi. These 10 are the levels of Sahih Ahādīth that we report. And that's very important to understand, because if a hadith is reported in the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari, then that is a higher level hadith than something that's reported maybe in the Musnad of Imam Bazar or so on, right? So sometimes you bring a hadith that meets the criteria of muttafaqun alayh, and somebody brings a hassan li ghayrihi in opposition to it. So according to the usul of hadith, that hadith from Bukhari and Muslim is of a higher caliber and should be given precedence. Now, usul al-fiqh and things of other madahib is a separate issue. We're just talking about the usul of hadith. Tayyib, what is the best chain? The highest level chain is going to be, and many different ulama gave different chains. Here Imam Ibn Hajar Asqalani has mentioned a few here, but I will mention all of them, and then I'll mention what my teachers and other A'imma and ulama like Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan and Shaykh al-Albani and others have given to be the best. Tayyib. So one of them that he mentioned is Imam al-Zuhri and Salim and Abdullah ibn Umar and Abihi. This is a very high chain. Why? Al-Zuhri, great Imam, great Alim, one of the fuqaha of Medina, great scholar of hadith, one of the first ulama to start writing down a hadith as in a book format, the one who inspired Imam Malik to write Muwatta Imam Malik, the one who was assigned this tag by Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, amazing, famous faqih scholar, Tayyib al-Zuhri. Who does he report from? Salim, the son of Abdullah ibn Umar. Who does he report it from? Abdullah ibn Umar. So only three narrators between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and, for example, Malik. The Imam Malik, for example, he reports from Zuhri, from Salim, from Abdullah ibn Umar. So now this is a very high chain. Then there is also Muhammad ibn Sirin, the great mufassir of al-Ru'ya, who would explain Ta'bir al-Ru'ya, dream interpreter, and great scholar, great faqih, great muhaddith. So Muhammad ibn Sirin and Ubaidah ibn Amr, and from Ubaidah ibn Amr and Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu. So this is another very high chain. Another one he mentioned is Ibrahim al-Nakhai and Alqama and Ibn Mas'ud. Ibrahim al-Nakhai, great faqih scholar, Alqama, tabi'i, famous scholar, mufassir, and Ibn Mas'ud, famous sahabi. So look at the very short chains, they only have three, all of these. So, and they are very authentic because each one of them is well known for their piety and their amazing memory and their knowledge of hadith and knowledge of memorizing. But the sanad that we find most of the ulama agree is the most authentic is the sanad that is Malik and Nafi' and Abdullah ibn Umar. From Imam Malik to Nafi', the great scholar and the Mawla of Ibn Umar, from Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma. This one, there's only two between Imam Malik and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who is it? Nafi' and Abdullah ibn Umar. Imam Malik records many of these in his Muwatta. Imagine only two narrators between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Imam Malik. And both of those, and Nafi', amazing scholar, Ibn Umar, amazing scholar, Sahabi. Only one narrator between Imam Malik and Ibn Umar. And that even is an amazing narrator. So this is called the golden chain. No doubt a very high level of sanad here. Ibn Hajar Asqalani himself also says, ثم تقدم after متفق عليه صحيح البخاري ثم المسلم ثم شروطهما فإن خف الضبط فالحسن and we talked about this already لذاته. طيب. Now what we will also mention, Imam Ibn Hajar Asqalani also in Nukhba and in the Nuzhat al-Nadhr, he explains and he mentions the asanid, ashal asanid, and he also mentions the same thing, Malik and Nafi' and Ibn Umar. So these are excellent chains and these are very high levels of chains. Tayyib, inshallah ta'ala, we will stop here and we'll continue next week. Jazakumullahu khairan.